thank you, Ambassador H.E. Shri K.D. Devalji, for your kind support and this opportunity to live stream Gandhi Katha in Armenia and Georgia. Namaskar and welcome to the Gandhi Katha, story of Mahatma Gandhi, narrated by me during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, which incidentally is also the 150th birth anniversary of Kasturba Gandhi, his wife. I convey my grateful thanks to the Embassy of India in Yerevan, Armenia, and Georgia for hosting Gandhi Katha amidst these challenging times to learn from Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, non-violence, and purity of means, his spirituality, his environmental credo, his practices of health and wellness, of body, mind, and spirit for coping up and staying safe physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually during and after the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic, which has affected the entire humanity. On October 2nd, the world celebrates the UN International Day of Nonviolence. And in India, we celebrate Mahatma Gandhi's birth anniversary as Gandhi Jayanti. The entire world is remembering Mahatma Gandhi, the apostle of peace and nonviolence. We have an opportunity to remind the humanity of the efficacy of the messages of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation. I pay my respects to the leading lights of Armenia and convey my greetings to the Armenians and the Armenian Indian community and the members of the Indo Armenian Friendship NGO. We stand in solidarity with you all in our common fight against the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic. Gandhi Katha is based on the ancient Indian oral tradition of Katha or storytelling with hymns and narration. I have given talks on Gandhi Katha in 94 countries. In all the countries, people have great reverence and respect for Mahatma Gandhi. Many people have been greatly inspired by Gandhiji to take up the cudgels against injustice through nonviolence. Others have followed his environmental credo, and still others have been deeply touched by his simple spiritual life. The new generation is eager to understand more about this greatest man of the last century who made such a huge impact on humanity and inspired many world leaders. Millions of people have been inspired by Gandhiji in the past and the present. Indo Armenian ties go back to thousands of years, and we have age old historical and friendly relationships between our two countries. Government of Armenia and the Yerevan municipality have installed the statue of Mahatma Gandhi in Yerevan. It is a befitting tribute to Mahatma Gandhi, who belongs to entire humanity. Mahatma Gandhi had high regard for the Armenian nation. When Armenian musician Rubin Karakhania visited India on a tour with his wife in 1935, Mahatma Gandhi himself invited him for a meeting in Calcutta. According to the memoirs of the musician, Mahatma Gandhi is said to have remarked, and I quote, I have some acquaintances and enough information about your noble Armenian nation. You are also a tormented people. When will the leaders of the world, the kings, and all those who have taken over the reins of government finally find a solution for you? I hope it does not stay this way. Where is it said that the tree bearing fruits needs to be constantly stoned? Gandhiji used to begin and end his day with prayers. These were prayers from all the religions of the world. Gandhiji's internal core comprised of the essence of all the religions, one that he had acquired from long study and reflection. The devotional poetry of the saint poets that he had heard, sung, and absorbed since childhood made up a significant part of the life of his soul. He said that ultimately all the religions point to the same truth of compassion, love, forgiveness, and tolerance, and that everyone must study the essence of all the religions in an attitude of perfect reverence and must have friendship and respect for the practitioners of different religions and diverse cultures. All of Gandhiji's friends were from different religions and diverse cultural background from around the world, and he actively encouraged friendship across religions. Gandhiji's legacy to the world, one very important one, is nonviolent conflict resolution through interfaith dialogues for conflict resolution, bringing about harmony, brotherhood, and unity. Even after 7 decades have passed since Gandhiji has passed on, in every part of the world, his relevance is felt as strongly as ever before, and his vision and actions are of enduring significance at all times and all places. His approach to life was holistic and cannot be divided into watertight compartments of social, religious, political, personal, or public life. Gandhiji stands out as a champion not only of political democracy but also of economic and spiritual democracy in today's world. Gandhiji believed that moral degeneration is the root cause of all evils, including conflicts. This explains his lifelong crusade of attainment of moral values such as truthfulness, nonviolence, purity of means, compassion, friendship, respect, service, love, self control, forgiveness, compassion, and mercy, etc. For Gandhiji, the principle behind satyagraha or non-violent resistance and civil disobedience was by non-participation or non-cooperation with evil through the moral values of love force, truth force, soul force, sacrifice, and self-suffering. For him, the consideration for the suffering of fellow human beings was of paramount importance. His belief and actions that social change for establishing justice and dignity of humans is both less harmful and more sustainable when achieved by nonviolent means. His legacy of satyagraha is widely recognized and practiced, and it is seen in many movements for civil rights even till today. Mahatma Gandhi's environmental practices were based on conservation of natural resources, which were often misused and overused for the sake of development. Gandhiji had warned about the unsustainability on global scale a century ago when he declared that the earth has enough for man's needs but not for man's greed. Equality for women within the society was a principle Gandhiji passionately believed in. His vision of Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, becomes very relevant in the crisis of internally displaced people and migrants. It may well have been done keeping in mind the very basic unit of human organization, a village or a county. His vision of Gram Swaraj, which is self reliant, independent, self governed villages built on the premises of sustainable growth, is the need of the hour. According to my understanding, Mahatma Gandhi's life was an epic of faith and endeavor. His faith was in truth, the ultimate reality of truth, and he endeavored to attain it through non-violence throughout his life till the very last breath. Gandhiji's adherence to truth, non-violence, and purity of means has inspired me to give Gandhi Katha so that people can put their hearts into understanding Gandhiji, get inspired to learn from his extraordinary ethical and moral leadership, his simple spiritual life, revolutionary thoughts, actions, his lifelong service to humanity against all forms of injustice, and how he continues to inspire people in all parts of the world at all times and in all ages. One of the reasons for giving Gandhi Katha is the joy I derive from narrating Gandhiji. As for me, it is like prayer and a process of spiritual progress which benefits me immensely. And if from Gandhi Katha you can learn something by listening intently, engage in self introspection, and learn from Gandhiji, it will be a great lesson to ponder upon his beliefs and experiments. So I will play a Gandhi Katha dhun which says about this same aspect in Hindi.
कथा को भाव से सुनकर अंतर को टटोले हम सबसे पहले अपने मन के सारे मैल धोले हम गांधी कथा को भाव से सुनकर अंतर को टटोले हम सबसे पहले अपने मन के सारे मैल धोले हम सत्यदीप से नित्य निरंतर भीतर को उजियारे हम सत्यदीप से नित्य निरंतर भीतर को उजियारे हम दम्भ दर्प और राग द्वेष को प्रेम अग्नि से जारे हम दम्भ दर्प और राग द्वेष को प्रेम अग्नि से जारे हम गांधी कथा को भाव से सुनकर अंदर को टटोले हम सबसे पहले अपने मन के सारे मैल धोले।
Perhaps the greatest source of strength for Mahatma Gandhi was in his faith in God. Truth was the deepest and the most complete form of God. The faith gave him the constant awareness that he was nothing but an instrument in his hands. He was to go wherever he was led. For him, the guidance of God constituted two things. One, he had to walk on the path enlightened by truth that was available to him in whatever measures and form. And was the path on which great world teachers had already traversed. Two, he had to constantly gaze inwards to find inspiration. Through self introspection, self examination, and self purification by constant questioning. The deeper the faith, the greater was the endeavor for Mahatma Gandhi. He said, Truth is God, Satya hi Parmeshwar hai. Faith in truth led Mahatma Gandhi to two other realizations. If God is omnipresent, then truth is omnipresent too. If each human being were an aspect of God, then each person is capable of being truthful, of being good, and doing good to others. The second realization was that in spite of all the upheavals in the history of humankind, humanity will only progress in an auspicious direction because truth, that is God, is only interested in the welfare of its creation. His endeavor throughout his life was devoted to the search of that element of truth, to awaken it and to nurture it. This is why he could feel oneness with everyone, and that was his main trait. For most of us, this realization does not set in easily. But because of this understanding of oneness, Gandhiji had no enemies. He did not want to settle scores with anyone, and he did not want to take any revenge. He merely wanted to extend his love, compassion, and respect to others. And that is again a trait that we see in Gandhiji. Another trait we see is that he respected individuals as individuals. I will talk about some more traits which were seeped in his spirituality. He used to treat all tasks as God given tasks and did every task with equal reverence. The other trait was because Gandhiji was an ordinary person like you and me, he used to feel sorrows and joys like us, but he shared his joys and sorrows with others. And he was ever vigilant and used to work for 18 to 20 hours selflessly. One of the main traits that we see in him that he remained positive under all circumstances. Romeo Rolla, the famous French writer and pacifist who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, wrote the biography of Mahatma Gandhi in 1924, and that made him quite well known in the West. In 1931, Mahatma Gandhi went to Switzerland to meet him, and he wrote about him, and I quote, "This little man is so fragile in appearance, is tireless, and fatigue is a word that does not exist in his vocabulary. He could calmly answer for hours without a muscle of face twitching. His mind proceeds through successive experiments into action, and he follows a straight line, but he never stops." I will play the Gandhi Katha hymn in Hindi that elaborates on Gandhiji's definition of truth as being having harmony between thought, words, and deeds.
मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर भगवान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर भगवान, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर भगवान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर भगवान।
Mahatma Gandhi is the greatest apostle of peace the world has seen in the recent past. His notion of peace is focused on tolerance, forgiveness, compassion, love, oneness, respect, truth force, love force, and soul force through self suffering and sacrifice to melt the hearts of the hardest of hard adversaries. Albert Einstein, the greatest scientist of the first half of the 20th century, had called Mahatma Gandhi as the supreme practical leader for change and listening to his voice.
I believe that Gandhi's views were the most enlightened of all the political men in our time. We should strive to do things in his spirit, not to use violence in fighting for our cause, but by non-participation in anything you believe is evil.
Gandhiji was the conscience keeper of humanity. That his ideas will be an inspiration to us both as individuals and as a society is beyond any doubt. He was an epoch maker, one who could sow the seeds for the next generation from the fruits of the previous one. Mahatma Gandhi is the most powerful visionary and the practical idealist from the first half of the last century, whose life is a role model for us all. But the effort has to begin from a point where you are standing. That is what made all Mahatma Gandhi's idealist actions practical, and he can be truly called a man of action. But it does not only mean that he was very busy. That, of course, he was. What we mean is the action of putting ideas or beliefs into practice more than anything else was the driving force in his life. The answer for Mahatma Gandhi was always found in action. He had said, an ounce of practice is worth more than tons of preaching. But if you want to understand Gandhiji, you will have to understand him not only with your intellect, but also from the emotional part of you and from acts from his life. Usually, people see him in different perspectives. And some people will think of Gandhiji mostly as politician, but at the same time, there are some others who think of him as a saint, and there are others who will think of Gandhiji as a nation builder. He may be all this, but I think when we consider Gandhiji, we have to try to find out what is the common stream in all these different aspects of life that we see in his personality. One was the commitment to value, and the second one was efficiency in the kind of work that he did. This is part of his comprehensiveness, and there was a unique mixture of, for example, enthusiasm on one hand and patience on the other. Mahatma Gandhi has made significant and seminal contributions that span across such disciplines as economics, environment, social justice, reforms, spirituality, conflict resolution, international peace, civil rights, education, politics, and society, and of course, in many more fields. At that time, the most harmful and destructive impact on the world was that of imperialism, violence, war, materialism, and the greed for controlling the world. Mahatma Gandhi advised to shun these seven social sins in his speech on October 22nd, 1925. Politics without principle, wealth without work, commerce without ethics, knowledge without character, pleasure without conscience, science without morality, worship without sacrifice. And in my opinion, Mahatma Gandhi's life left the most powerful and strong imprint on the humanity of the world. He had said, my life is my message. John Haynes Holmes was a pacifist, an anti war activist, and founder of the American Civil Liberties Union. He had met Gandhiji in London in 1931 and later on in Delhi in 1947. He found Mahatma Gandhi's presence, those bright eyes shining through his spectacles, his voice so clear and yet so gentle, his whole presence so simple and yet so strong. He said, and I quote, I believe that unquestionably, the greatest man living in the world today, and one of the greatest men who has ever lived. When I think of Gandhi, I think of Jesus Christ. I will play the Gandhi Katha dhun in Hindi about Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, non-violence, and purity of means, which combine together to form Satyagraha.
लागी रे लगन लागी रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागी रे लगन लागी रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सत्य अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागी लगन लागी लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन
Time magazine had listed out three most important protests over 190 years. The first one was the Boston Tea Party. The second one was the Dandi March or the Salt Satyagraha. And the third one was the March of Washington. We can see a common thread. The first and second were against the same company, the East India Company. There is a common thread of nonviolence in all three. In 1930, with a pinch of salt, Mahatma Gandhi shook the world. He started out on 12th March from his Sabarmati ashram in Ahmedabad in Gujarat for Dandi seashore with 79 fellow marchers, walked for 24 days, walking 10 miles a day, stopped at 48 villages, gave speeches morning and evening to mobilize people to participate in the non cooperation movement, covered 241 miles till he reached Dandi seashore on 5th April. In the early morning hours of 6th April, when he bent down to pick up a fistful of muddy lump of earth with salt, 100,000 people joined him. And towards, as the campaign progressed, Satyagraha progressed, 300,000 people broke the salt law all over India. 1,362 newspapers covered the news, and many foreign reporters had congregated there. One of them, William Lawrence Shearer, the American journalist, was present during the salt satyagraha, and he saw the police atrocities on the non-violent satyagrahis and sent his graphic reporting, which brought the incidents to the notice of the world, and the world woke up to the power of satyagraha, to the power of non-violence. So Mahatma Gandhi remains the most powerful global brand ambassador of non-violence, a youth icon who stood against injustice of all forms, an apostle of peace and non-violence, a man whose values can make the world a better place today. Gandhiji spent his formative years, 18 years in India, where the seeds of spirituality were sown. He spent 3 years in London to become a barrister, where he broadened his vision by meeting and reading the works of the great thinkers and philosophers. And he spent nearly 20 years in South Africa, where he underwent his sadhana and came up with satyagraha, which he used against injustice. And in 1904 in South Africa, after reading John Ruskin's book Unto This Last, Barrister Mohandas Gandhi transformed his life and started leading a community life of self control, voluntary poverty, bread labor, and servodaya, welfare of all. He established four ashrams in his lifetime, two in South Africa called Phoenix Settlement in 1904 and Tolstoy Farm in 1910, and two ashrams in India in 1917 in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, called the Sabarmati Ashram, and the Sevagram Ashram in Wardha, Maharashtra in 1936. It is here that he and Kasturba Gandhi, along with the ashram community, lived in poverty like the common villagers. Ashrams were his ideals of non-violent, face-to-face society for Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, and carrying out constructive programs, which is his second gift to humanity, the first one being Satyagraha. Gandhiji's ashrams had a mingling of political and spiritual aims. It was a practical laboratory for transforming ordinary men and women into extraordinary seekers and satyagrahis, for offering the highest sacrifice in the freedom struggle on one hand, and to get involved in the constructive programs to serve the poorest of the poor, to establish their self respect and dignity. It is here that he conducted all his experiments of Sarvodaya, Swachhata, cleanliness, Swavalamban, self reliance, Seva, and service to humanity, for realizing his vision of village republic or Gram Swaraj. I'm happy to inform you that I was born in the last ashram in Sevagram. My father was inspired by Gandhiji and since his childhood and joined the non-violent freedom struggle in India and lived in the Sevagram ashram. The life and thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi are intertwined and inseparable. His politics was imbued with his spiritual experiments, and his spirituality was tempered by his vision of a non-violent society, and his constructive program was integral to his politics. The unique practices of Mahatma Gandhi, his control of palate, his fasts, his spinning, his silence, and his prayers gave him the internal strength. They were as much a part of his politics as of his spiritual life. These practices and experiments were sustained and nurtured by the ashram community in the ashram that he had founded. The ashram community, through its own practices, affirmed, modified, and validated Mahatma Gandhi's ideals and practices and continues to do so even till today. This shows the relevance of his practices. Gandhiji carried out his experiments in health and wellness through nature cure, diet control, hydrotherapy, sun bath, mud packs, and observing silence for one whole day. The ashram inmates not only participated but modified and validated them. And one of such person was our friend and the British Quaker Sir Horace Alexander, who lived in Gandhiji's ashram for quite some time. And he noticed that the bell used to go ring 56 times during the daytime in the ashram. He said, and I quote, Gandhiji had wonderful courtesy and punctuality. I was to learn quickly that he was the slave of the watch. He had more to do in 24 hours than almost any other man. So he had learned how to pack the most in every minute. Yet he never gave the impression of being hurried and impatient. Gandhiji has given three gifts to humanity, and that is first one is satyagraha, the second one is constructive programs, and the third one about peop- which people do not know is Ekadasha Vrata or the 11 observances, which were a set of rules formulated by Gandhiji for the ashram community for their spiritual progress and voluntary self control. The principle behind these observances was to do unto others as you want others to do unto you. Ivan Illich, the Croatian Austrian philosopher, came to India and lived in Sevagram Ashram in 1980 for one whole week. And daily he used to sit in the Bapu Kuti or the cottage where Gandhiji lived, which was made up of a simple structure, locally available material. And he said, and I quote, this hut of Mahatma Gandhi demonstrates to the world how the dignity of the common man can be brought up. It is also a symbol of happiness which we can derive from practicing the disciplines of simplicity, service, and truthfulness. Now I will play a Gandhi Katha dhun which explains Gandhiji's philosophy of truth as God. Aankhein Pavitra.
आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल.
See that one of the comments is made by Abhishek Arjun, who wants to me to talk about detachment. So from the days of his student years, when Gandhiji came across the Bhagavad Gita, he started understanding it very clearly. And the central message of the Bhagavad Gita of being selfless, without attachment and position, and remaining detached became his conduct for the rest of his life. And this is something that one learns about Gandhiji if anyone wants to know how to lead his life according to the Bhagavad Gita. Here, Gandhiji stands in front of us as an example. Though Gandhiji's role and contribution to the political arena are well known, what is less known is his contribution towards health and well being. Gandhiji was a firm believer in the principle that a healthy mind keeps the body healthy, and he stressed the importance of a healthy lifestyle and positive thinking. His interest in health, hygiene, nutrition, and diseases was as great as his interest in politics. He insisted that adopting preventive measures for diseases was better than treatment. He also said that it was important to focus on cleanliness, a controlled diet, and an exercise regimen, and that it was best to avoid overconsumption of medicines, especially those that were not required. He was also a firm believer and practitioner of nature cure and conducted experiments related to dietetics and fasting from a very early age. He always believed that it was important to understand what caused diseases and then remove that very cause rather than falling ill again and again and then attempting to treat it with excessive medication. Gandhiji was essentially a man of science and spirituality. He approached problems in a scientific manner. Gandhiji's message to the world on the vital question of health and well being is very important. To him, the study of this question was part of his service to God and his creation, which was his mission. Knowing to care summed up his life. His message is simple and easy to follow. It encouraged everyone to respect simplicity, voluntary self control, reduce the wants, follow the tradition, cultural practices, values, and the environmental credo of reduce, refuse, recycle, and reuse, and treat oneself through nature cure for living in harmony with nature. Gandhiji was very interested in health and wellness and remained ever vigilant about his own health as well as of others. He said that our lifestyle should be such that it should not let any diseases come anywhere near us, and every person is responsible for looking after his or her body, mind, and spirit impeccably. He also advised in order to keep physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy, we should have perfect understanding of our bodies, which is made up of the five elements that are found in nature. And that is what has been told by our ancient seers and sages in India. And these five elements are air, water, fire, earth, and space. For the wellness of our bodies, the balance and harmony between all these five elements is necessary. For Gandhiji, the outside universe was but a reflection of the inside universe. He repeated time and again that the universe is compressed in the atom. There is not one law for the atom and another for the universe. It was based on his actual spiritual experience that gave him the conviction that the moral principles have no meaning unless they can be made to serve as the guide of conduct in the daily affairs of man. There is a Sanskrit proverb which says, Yatha Pinde Tatha Brahmande, you are the universe within the universe. As with the self, so is the universe. What is going on within you is same as what is going on in the universe. In the morning and evening prayers in the ashram, the first shloka from the Ishopanishad, the shortest Upanishad in India, was recited every day. Isha vasyamidam sarvam yat kincha jagatyan jagat tena tyaktena bhunjitha ma gridha kasya svidhanam. That the entire universe belongs to God. Nothing really belongs to us. Enjoy the objects of the world in an attitude of perfect detachment and take what is necessary for you and leave the rest for others in the society. Never ever crave the position of others. Nothing really belongs to you. Now I will play the Gandhi Katha dhun, which explains this in Hindi, and that is ना यह तेरा ना यह मेरा ईश्वर का यह राज है.
ना यह तेरा ना यह
August 1942, Gandhiji wrote the book Key to Health, in which he wrote that anyone who observes the rules of health mentioned in this book will find that he has got in it a real key to unlock the gates leading him to health. He will not need to knock at the doors of the doctors or Vaidyas or the traditional health practitioners from day to day. Today, the world is facing three kinds of crisis globally. First is the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic. The second one is the serious and long drawn financial crisis. And the third one is the ecological crisis, which has impacted everyone. We have to look for answers somewhere within ourselves by learning from the life of Gandhiji, which is such a transparent and open life. And all the learnings, all the messages are very much available to us. The lesson the pandemic is teaching us is simple. When one member of the family falls sick, the entire family is affected, and soon the community is affected, the nation is affected, and then the other communities in other worlds in this globalized world. The well being of one individual has an impact on people on the other side of the globe. This is true of every action of ours. What we eat, what we buy, what we think, and what we do has reverberations and repercussions on all life on earth. It is this anubandha, this interconnectedness that sustains all life on earth. We are all in this together as one human family, as brothers and sisters. Whether we see it or not, we only have one home, this planet Earth, our Mother Earth. Our ancient sages and seers have always looked upon us as Vishwamanava, global citizens, and said that the world is one family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The current COVID 19 pandemic is a wake up call for every country, big or small, rich or poor, developed or developing. It has opened our eyes to the fragility of human existence. So, when a crisis makes you feel really stressed, meditation, prayer, and chanting relieves the stress response. Fear and anxiety are forms of stress that become exaggerated when events become uncertain and when you feel a loss of control over the situation. And when the stress keeps repeating itself without let up, the thinking mind reacts to all of these conditions. It always has, even in normal times. But a crisis brings stress into high relief, making it very capable of lowering the immune system of our bodies and causing inflammatory diseases. So Gandhiji comes across as the greatest healer and wellness guru who comes free of cost. The Gandhian principles of freedom from fear and care for all is a perfect prescription in these times of crisis. Gandhiji's emphasis on healthy lifestyle, empowerment for self-care, and care of the community would make perfect sense. I once again take this opportunity to thank the Indian Mission for hosting Gandhi Katha. My special thanks to all of you who have joined me online. I will end with the peace benediction in Sanskrit for the universal welfare. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let all be happy. Let all be healthy. Let all experience auspiciousness. Let no one be overwhelmed by grief. Om, peace, peace, peace. With Gandhiji's blessings, who had said that peace is the only positive force which will lead us from darkness towards light. I will end with Gandhi Katha hymn in Hindi, Shubhamangal Ho. May there be auspicious good. May there be good. May the earth be auspicious. May the sky be auspicious. May every particle on this earth be auspicious.
मंगल हो